Okay. Intro time. Intro time. Hell yeah. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Safari Pedal Show. I'm your host, Abby. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Safari Podcast Zoo YouTube Crazy Thing Wild Bandwagon. It's great to have you. So I'm going to preface this episode by saying, for those of you who have not tuned into the show before, that this podcast is following my journey as a new producer who is just starting out, and the whole overarching theme is kind of the journey and the learning curves and the lessons and the trials and tribulations and the fun moments as well. And the reason I'm saying that is because I did an episode like this once before with Trinity Wolford, who is an awesome mix engineer. We dove into her mix evolution process, where she started, and kind of her journey through it. And I've really wanted to do another episode of that nature, kind of diving into the whole evolution. I just hit my microphone, don't mind that. So I'm very excited to be doing that here again today. And our amazing guest we will welcome into the crazy Safari Pedals world in just a moment. Sam Sherbin is going to be on the show. I'm really excited to dive in and learn more and just kind of get a take on someone else's journey and learn from it. And I feel like there's not much more I can add to this intro. So guys, please give a very, very warm Safari welcome to Sam Sherbin.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you hopping on the show. Before we dive into today's episode and get to all of the juice and the sauce, you can say, let's start with who you are, what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, my name is Sam Sherbin. I'm a mixing engineer. Been mixing professionally for over a decade. I'm based in LA, and I primarily work in the pop space, and also kind of subgenres of pop, K-pop, hip-hop. Yeah, it's kind of an eclectic discography for sure.
How did your audio journey start? Like, how did you get into the whole world of mixing and engineering?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started off as an artist producer. So technically I started off, I was 11 years old, and I got into sound recording, which is like, there was a sound recording app in Windows that was called Sound Recorder. That was just like a mono, hit record, play, reverse, fast forward. That's all it had. It had like 4 functions, and I would record songs on there. And then I kind of had to, take it further along, and got like a microphone from Radio Shack. Like, started off the whole journey like completely from like nothing. From having like no microphone, no input, no speakers, to getting a microphone, getting some speakers, and slowly just evolving as I grew up. Then I started putting songs up on MySpace, because I was still, as an artist, I wanted to put my music out there. I got into mixing and recording just out of necessity, because I wanted to put my music out there. That's literally how it happened.
It kind of like had the natural flow of things.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're a producer, so like once you start going down your path of passion, you find out that there's many other doors involved in that. You're like, oh, now I know. Now there's sound design, there's mixing, there's mastering, there's recording, there's editing. It can go so many different ways.
It's true. It's like an endless vortex, for sure.
It is. No, it is a vortex.
in a good way. Guys, it's a positive vortex of unicorns and compressors. It's a great place to be. This episode, we're going to be diving in a little bit to your evolution as a mixer. Can you kind of give like a synopsis of where your mixes started and how you kind of got to the place where you are, maybe some lessons or things that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think mixing is one of those skills where experience is always going to be your best friend. Like, you have to keep mixing every day. You have to challenge yourself. And then also, as you get better, your collaborators, the artists that you work with, get better. And all of a sudden, you go from working with someone that has 10 followers to people that have millions of followers, and getting your mixes on TV and getting your mixes on Billboard and things like that. There's always like a natural progression, but it took years to get to that point. So back to your question, it kind of evolved in a very like easy, very simple setup, which was like, I need a compressor, I need a reverb, I need, a delay. And then starting to use those tools and then mastering the few tools that I had, because I didn't have a million plugins. I had like stock GarageBand plugins. So like my mixes, I think they always came from like a musical perspective because I started off playing violin when I was 11. And then the technical side of things, I had to learn because mainly self-taught, did not go to school for engineering and didn't assist a mixer. So my journey was completely like learning as much as I can and finding mentors along the way. So a big life lesson and game changer for me was meeting my mentor, Bruce Swedien, in 2010. And Bruce Swedien was Michael Jackson's engineer, mixed and recorded all of Thriller and Bad, Off the Wall. He also recorded like Oscar Peterson and Paul McCartney, just all the giants of American, music, pop music at that time. And learning from him was just like, you have to work on the best music that you can and know your gear, trust that you know your gear, and take your career, seriously. That was the game changer as well, like learning from someone who's literally mixed the biggest record of all time, fundamentals of mixing. I think from there, I got more confident to say that this is what I want to do, and then I took it even further along. After that point, I had gone to New York and I was assisting this band for 2 years, so then I was around analog equipment like all day long. So we had like an SSLG console and we had a Fairchild and we had LA2A. It was like a playground, right? So you come from not having a lot to dealing with software, and then dealing with hardware, learning that, one day your compressor might act a little weird. Things break all the time, to like then finding your own workflow. And my workflow at that time was hybrid between analog and digital. Once I learned analog and mixing with gear, then I was like, I need to do recalls. That's what made me want to mix inside the box, because I was like, the recalls are going to take some time. The gear is like, I had stuff that were stepped. And if people don't know, stepped gear is like, if you land on 2, it's always going to land on 2. It's not going to be in between like 1 and 2. And you have to like try to figure out as close as you can get it. So once I completely went into the box, then I felt like my mixes dramatically improved. But I kind of had to tell myself, don't get lost in every new plugin that's going to come out, because every new plugin is like the greatest plugin in the world. But it's like, you have to know your tools,
Since the show is really about starting out and being up and coming, do you have any tips based on your whole evolution of mixing and your workflow changing? Do you have any tips to engineers and producers starting out, things that they can learn from your evolution?
I think it's being very clear on what the client needs and asking for references and asking for any songs that they like really getting the understanding of what they need and what they're looking for, and then getting what they have. I always ask for the bounce that they're listening to, like the version that they think is final, and then I get the stems. So my workflow now is to import the stems, import their mix, line up their mix with the stems, and make sure they're perfect. Like they're exactly the same. So I go from section to section to section, make sure they're perfectly the same, and then from that point, you're not kind of chasing your tail. And then you're like, when you send a mix off, they're not going to be like, oh my God, it's so much more different than what we expected. It's like, as a professional, you have to like understand what you're being hired for. And my workflow is just to enhance what they have, but not go backwards. So my template or workflow is based on like, I need to match this and I need to make it better. But first I need to match it completely. So I'm not working with files that aren't the same, or, it's kind of like they're giving you the record as done as the record could be on their end. So like you need to make sure that you have everything that you need And what I could say to any upcoming engineers or producers is really be organized, like be super organized. When I start a mix, I save the mix probably 4 times before I even like send out first version, right? So I have one that's called prep, and that one is just the files in the section. Then I have another one that says ready, and ready is color coded and balanced. And then I get into like the mixed version, like my first mix. So at any given point, I can always go backwards to any iteration of the song. If I want to remix it or if they gave me new stems, I would change that. And, it's all about being super organized with your files and making sure that you have everything you need to build yourself up for success. Because I think a lot of people are always talking about process and things that plugins or tips or tricks, like once you're inside the mix and like once you're actually working or getting towards the end of a mix, but getting everything ready beforehand is like super important.
I love, and this is the first time I've heard like saving multiple versions, like you said, kind of leading up. So you kind of build a safety net for yourself. I love that. And I want to emphasize that because that is a great piece of advice that I need to start taking from this point on.
I think it's super important because, like I'll give you an example. Let's say you start the mix and you start it on version 1, and then all of a sudden they come back to you and they say, well, we want to change this guitar solo. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, do I change it to version 2? Since you have these other iterations, you can just go into an early one, update that one, and then call that one ready, because that's the ready to mix version. Because now they basically said your mixes, they're not ready for you to mix yet, but you're ready to mix, so you already started your mixing. But not to confuse yourself, so when you start, and then let's say you do mix number 2, and then they say, you know what, we want to hear the first version with the first solo, could you revert back to that one? Then you're like, oh my God, then you're kind of like chasing your tail. So you always want different versions and different safety nets of different files. And the files, they take up no space, so you can just save as many files as you need to. But saving files and relabeling files as you get new files coming in. So if I get a mix and it's like mix 1, and then they give me a new guitar solo, I'll say mix 1, new guitar solo. So I know that the first one was the original one. This one is the same arrangement with one thing changed. And yeah, I always use, in Pro Tools, there's like a comment section. So I'll write that this is a new file. This is a new solo, the tempo had changed or something, right? I'm always like documenting what's going on if there's any changes, just in case they want to revert back.
That's so valuable. It's never dawned on me to do that, but now I will definitely be doing that from here on out. Going to be the queen of labeling.
Trust me, it helps, because speaking of labels, once you deal with labels and you need to deal with deliverables, you need to make sure that you're delivering the exact record that everyone approved on. From there, we're going back into the final thing. People have like a bounce folder, right? So in Pro Tools, they'll say bounce folder. I'll make more folders inside of that saying that this is the main mixes, here are the deliverables. So when I send it to like a file transfer, all I have to do is click one button, everything is organized, everything is labeled, and I label everything. Label all my auxes, relabel all my IO, label all my files. You know what I mean? Like labeling everything just makes sure that you know exactly what you're sending, because I've done this before where I sent out the wrong mix. It's not cool for someone to be like, what's wrong with this? And then you're like, oh, wow, I sent the wrong version, because I wasn't keeping tabs how many times I was making versions of it. It's just really to ensure quality control. Because if you're working by yourself, right, like I don't have an assistant, so I need to have like almost like an assistant workflow for myself, making sure everything is good. Yeah.
On the note of kind of summing up the whole topic of evolution and getting better, I always love at the end of an episode to have our amazing guest either drop a piece of advice or anything you want to say to the amazing Studio Animal viewers. Feel free to freestyle on any topic that you would like.
Oh wow, this is interesting. yeah, just remember your why. Remember why you're doing it. Remember your love for the music and your passion. And it's not always going to be a bad day. It could be just a bad moment, but you can just work it through and remember to practice gratitude. Be grateful for where you are now in your career and what you have and the tools that you have. I could assure you that being grateful, you're going to get more blessings and more opportunities. They're just going to continue, but staying thankful for what you have, and it's going to help you really move forward with gratitude, and you're going to do great work with that. So
I got to clap on that one. That was so great. Hey.
Hey.
Slay! Slay!
But there was really like so many gems this episode, and I really learned a lot, and I appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge and experience.
I appreciate being on the podcast, and I thank you so much, and I hope any of this advice can help anyone.
I really think it will, and